Chapter 91 drops us back into the ruins of a broken soul, and it opens with a problem as practical as it is grim. The bridges are destroyed, all of them, and a level 7 monster called an ichthyosaur prowls the flooded gaps between the group and where they need to go. Dokja weighs the options with that dry, calculating mind of his. Swim across the waters full of things that would eat them. Hunt the monster down. Possible, but costly. The apocalypse has turned even geography into a death trap, and every path forward has teeth. But the real heart of this chapter isn't the monster. It's the people. Because as the group moves through the ruins, they run into other survivors, wanderers, and immediately the story poses the question that sits at the center of all of Omniscient readers' viewpoint. In a world where survival is everything, what do you owe to strangers? These wanderers are starving, desperate, dangerous in the way that only truly hungry people can be. And Dokja, who has read this story 1,000 times, states the cold truth out loud. People are the most dangerous thing in the apocalypse. He could kill them all if he wanted to. The threat is real, and he's not wrong. And yet, in the very same breath, the chapter gives us its beautiful counterweight. Because on the contrary, Dokja thinks, he could also save them all. That's the tension the whole series lives in, the razor's edge between ruthlessness and mercy, between the reader who knows exactly how cruel this world can be and the human being who refuses to stop caring anyway. Dokja holds both truths at once, and that contradiction is what makes him such a compelling protagonist. It's Usanga who embodies the compassionate side most directly here. When they encounter the starving survivors, her instinct is to share their food, to help, to treat these desperate people as human beings rather than threats. Dokja teases her about it, calling her two-faced, and she gives a wonderfully honest answer. Yes, she does good deeds. But she admits, with a self-aware little smile, that a lot of it is calculated too. She helps because it's right, and also because being the kind of person people become fond of is useful in a world like this. The chapter even nods to how she reads like the female protagonist of some novel, poised and principled, the moral center the group orbits around. It's a lovely bit of characterization, letting her be both genuinely kind and quietly strategic, refusing to flatten her into a simple saint. Then the chapter introduces the figure who will change everything. A little girl. She emerges from the ruins, small and alone, and immediately she's remarkable, because a child this young has somehow survived all the way to the 5th scenario without any guardians at all. In this apocalypse, that should be nearly impossible. She's polite to a fault, bowing, thanking them with careful manners that feel almost out of place amid all the death. This girl has good manners, someone notes, and there's something heartbreaking about it, a child clinging to the small courtesies of a world that no longer exists. The group asks about her parents, and the answer is quiet and devastating. Both of them are gone. She's completely alone, a little girl who survived the end of the world by herself, and now she stands in front of these strangers with nothing but her politeness and her thanks. She didn't even come to beg for help. She came, it seems, simply to say thank you, which somehow makes it worse. The others mutter that helping her would just waste their time and food, the brutal arithmetic of survival talking. But the image of this lonely, well-mannered child lingers, impossible to fully dismiss. They give her a little kindness anyway. Blankets against the cold. And a constellation watching from beyond, the demonic judge of fire, is moved enough by the moment to gift them 2,000 coins, a reminder that even in this hell, acts of decency are being witnessed and, sometimes, rewarded. The girl thanks them for the blankets, this small warmth. In a freezing, ruined city, and for a moment the chapter lets the tenderness breathe. But Omniscient reader's viewpoint never lets tenderness sit uncomplicated for long. Because there's a sub-scenario running underneath all of this, cold blue system windows laying out the rules. Survival activities. The group must survive in the ruined city for 10 days, eating 3 meals, sleeping 6 hours, paying a survival fee each night, or face a penalty. Death, for failure. 5 days remain on the clock. The apocalypse has turned even basic human existence, eating, sleeping, staying alive, into a scored game with lethal stakes. And into that game walks a lonely little girl who might just be another mouth to feed, another liability, another impossible choice. The chapter closes on a note of quiet dread, because Yoo Jung-hyuk, the regressor who has lived this story countless times, looks at the girl with something dark and knowing in his eyes. And he says the words that turn the whole warm, compassionate chapter cold. You know what to do, right? It's a question loaded with terrible meaning, because Jung-hyuk knows something about this child that the others don't. Something from a future he's already lived. And whatever it is, it's enough that this hardened, weary warrior is looking at a polite little orphan and thinking she needs to be dealt with. That's the genius of chapter 91. It spends its whole length building sympathy, showing us Yoo Sang-ge's kindness, Kim Dokja's contradictions, the heartbreaking image of a child surviving the apocalypse alone with nothing but good manners. It makes you care about her. And then, right at the end, it plants a seed of horror, the suggestion that this innocent girl is somehow a threat serious enough that the group's most experienced fighter thinks she should die. The mercy and the menace are set on a collision course, and you can feel the impossible choice bearing down. What makes this such a strong chapter is how it refuses easy answers. Yoo Jung-hyuk isn't a villain for what he's implying. He's a man who has watched the world end more times than anyone should, who knows exactly what certain seeds grow into. And Kim Dokja isn't naive for feeling for the girl. He's a reader who understands that the choices you make in a story are what define you. The chapter sets these two philosophies against each other, ruthless foresight versus stubborn compassion, and leaves them hanging over the small, quiet figure of a little girl who just wanted to say thank you. It's the calm before a storm of conscience, and by the final panel, you're desperate to know what secret Jung-hyuk is carrying, and what Kim Dokja will do when he learns it. It's worth dwelling on how carefully this chapter positions Kim Dokja between two irreconcilable worldviews, because that positioning is the entire engine of the series. On one side stands Yoo Jung-hyuk, the regressor, a man who has lived and died through this apocalypse more times than any human mind should be able to bear. Every scar he carries is a lesson written in someone else's blood. When he looks at Yoo Sung-shin and sees a catastrophe, he isn't being cruel, he's being honest about a future he has personally watched unfold. His certainty is the certainty of a man who has already tried every gentler path and found nothing but graves at the end of them. To ignore him is to ignore hard-won truth. And on the other side stands Kim Dokja, the reader, whose knowledge comes not from living the story but from reading it, from understanding it as a narrative that can bend, twist, and surprise. Where Jung-hyuk sees an inevitable ending, Dokja sees a plot that hasn't been written yet. The chapter refuses to tell you which of them is right, and that refusal is exactly what gives it such tension. Because if Jung-hyuk is right, then mercy here is suicide, an act of sentiment that could cost an entire city its life. And if Dokja is right, then killing the girl is a betrayal of the very hope that makes survival worth anything at all. The little orphan standing between them. Polite and hollow and ready to accept whatever the adults decide, becomes the physical embodiment of the question the whole series keeps asking. Is fate a wall, or is it a door? And are you brave enough to find out which? Chapter 92 is Omniscient reader's viewpoint at its philosophical, emotional best, and it turns a simple question, should we kill this little girl, into a meditation on fate, free will, and what it means to choose mercy in a world that punishes it. It picks up right where the last chapter's dread left off, with a knife on the ground and Yoo Jung-hyuk's cold certainty hanging in the air. You're not going anywhere, he tells the child. And slowly, terribly, the group learns why. The girl, whose name is Yoo Sung-shin, is not just an orphan who survived the apocalypse alone. According to Yoo Jung-hyuk, who has lived this story through countless regressions, she is destined to become the final catastrophe of the fifth scenario. In 5 days, she will end up destroying Seoul. This sweet, polite child, the one who bowed and thanked them for blankets, is fated to become one of the most dangerous forces in the entire apocalypse. Jung-hyuk has seen it. He knows how this ends. And so his logic is brutal but not cruel. Kill her now, while she's small and helpless, and prevent the catastrophe before it can ever hatch. The chapter leans into just how impossible this is to accept. Kill her. But she's just a regular girl. That's the protest, the thing every decent instinct screams. Yoo Sang-ga can't stand the idea. Kim Dokja recoils from it. And yet Jung-hyuk's history can't simply be dismissed, because he's tried other ways before. The story reveals that in past regressions, Jung-hyuk made similar attempts, tried to guide her, tried to prevent her from becoming a catastrophe by taking care of her better, and failed every single time. He even mentions a wound that could not be healed without a resuscitation skill, the scars of a man who has watched this go wrong again and again. His ruthlessness isn't callousness. It's exhaustion. It's the certainty of someone who has already tried kindness and buried the results. What makes it even more haunting is the detail that catastrophes usually hatch from meteorites, born of something alien and external. But Yoo Shin didn't. She's a human being, born on planet Earth, and yet she'll still become the catastrophe anyway. That's the tragedy the chapter keeps circling. There's no monster hidden inside her waiting to burst out. There's just a little girl and a future that says she'll become something terrible. The horror isn't that she's secretly evil. It's that fate has simply decided her ending, regardless of who she is right now. And then the chapter delivers its gut punch, because Yoo Shin overhears them. She listens to these strangers debate whether she should die, and instead of running or begging, she does something that breaks your heart. She accepts it. She turns the terrible logic on herself and asks how bad she'll become, and when they tell her she'll probably be the worst person in Seoul, she isn't even surprised. Because she already feels like a bad person. She already carries a weight of self-loathing far too heavy for a child. And so she offers them her own life. "You can kill me," she says. "I'm ready." A little girl, standing calm and hollow, telling the adults it's okay to end her because she believes she deserves it. It's one of the most devastating moments in this whole stretch of the story, and it completely reframes the moral question. This isn't about stopping a villain anymore. It's about a broken child who has so thoroughly internalized her supposed monstrousness that she's willing to die for a crime she hasn't committed yet. And that's exactly the moment Kim Dokja steps in and refuses to let the story go the easy way. Because here's the thing that makes Kim Dokja who he is. He says it plainly. If he were the main character of this story, he would have killed her without a second thought. That's what a protagonist does, makes the hard call, eliminates the threat, saves the many by sacrificing the one. But Kim Dokja isn't the main character. He's a reader. And a reader, he believes, should make the choices a reader would make. He has read this world's story from the outside. He knows that endings aren't fixed just because someone says they are. And he decides, with quiet defiance, that this girl's death is not the ending he wants. The chapter grounds this in something beautiful about Yoo Jung-hyuk himself. Because what is Jung-hyuk doing, across all his endless regressions? He's fighting to change things. He refuses to accept that the world can't be different. And Kim Dokja seizes on that contradiction. If Jung-hyuk's whole existence is a war against a fixed fate, then killing a child simply because of an inevitable future betrays the very thing Jung-hyuk is fighting for. If he ends up killing someone just because of an inevitable future, then what was the point of all those regressions to change the world? Dokja uses Jung-hyuk's own philosophy against him, and it lands, because it's true. You can't spend 1,000 lives trying to break destiny and then murder a little girl because destiny told you to. So Kim Dokja makes his choice, and it's pure him, equal parts compassion and calculation. He announces that there is a way to stop the catastrophe, but it's only possible if they help him. And then he does the most Kim Dokja thing imaginable. He starts spending money. He gifts Yuzong Shin growth packages, a new scenario anniversary package, coins, pouring resources into this frightened child. It's fine, he says with a grin, I've got a lot of money. He'll prevent this child from dying, and he'll do it, he says, for Junghyuk's sake. It's such a wonderful character beat, solving a moral crisis with reckless generosity, refusing to let a kid die and backing it up with everything he's got. And then the reveal that makes the whole gamble sing. Because this girl, this supposed catastrophe, this child everyone wanted to kill, will grow up to become one of the 100 strongest people in the entire world. The Beast Lord, Yuzong Shin. Kim Dokja isn't just saving a life out of sentiment. He's making an investment, seeing the potential where everyone else saw only the threat. The child who might become a catastrophe, within 5 days, will become stronger than any of them. And Dokja claims her, in the warmest way possible, as his first incarnation of this round. Not a liability to be eliminated. A person to be believed in. The chapter caps it with a simple, human introduction that carries enormous weight. He tells her his name. I'm Dokja. Dokja Kim. After all the cold system windows and talk of catastrophes and inevitable futures, it comes down to a man kneeling to a scared little girl and telling her who he is, choosing to see her as a person worth knowing rather than a problem worth solving. Your death, he tells her, isn't the ending I want. Don't worry. And in those few words, he rewrites her entire future. What makes chapter 92 so powerful is that it doesn't pretend the easy answer is wrong. Yoo Jung-hyuk might be right. She might still become a catastrophe. Saving her might doom them all. The chapter never lets Dokja's mercy feel safe or guaranteed. That's what gives it weight. He's making a genuine gamble, betting everything on the belief that a person is more than their prophesied ending, that even a fate written in stone can be rewritten by someone stubborn enough to try. It's the thesis of the entire series distilled into a single choice. Kim Dokja read a story where a little girl became a monster, and instead of accepting that ending, he decided to write a better one. And that's why this chapter hits as hard as it does. It takes the coldest possible calculus, kill one child to save a city, and answers it not with naive optimism but with a reader's conviction that stories can change, that people can be saved, that the worst possible future isn't the only one available. Yuzong Shin came to them alone, hollow, ready to die for a crime she hadn't committed. And she leaves as someone's incarnation, someone's investment, someone's belief made real. The Beast Lord's legend doesn't begin with power or violence. It begins with a man who refused to let a scared little girl believe she deserved to die. In a series full of monsters and gods and world-ending catastrophes, Chapter 92 reminds you that the most radical act of all is simply choosing to be kind when everything tells you not to be. It's worth slowing down to appreciate just how radical Kim Dokja's philosophy really is, because it's easy to mistake it for simple softness, and it's anything but. Dokja is not a naive optimist who believes everyone is secretly good. He's read this story. He knows exactly how dark it gets, how people betray each other, how the apocalypse grinds decency into dust. His mercy isn't ignorance of the darkness, it's defiance of it. When he says that a reader should make the choices a reader would make, he's articulating an entire moral universe. A character inside a story is trapped by the plot, forced to react, swept along by inevitability. But a reader stands outside, holds the whole shape of the narrative in their hands, and understands that an ending is only an ending until someone decides to turn the page. Dokja refuses to be a character. He insists on being a reader even from inside the book, and that insistence is the single most powerful thing about him. Consider what he's actually betting here. He's not just risking his own life. He's risking soul, risking his companions, risking everything, all on the conviction that a prophesied monster can become a hero if someone simply refuses to give up on her. That's an almost unbearable weight of responsibility, and he takes it on with a grin and a joke about how much money he has. But underneath the levity is something close to holy stubbornness. He looks at a child who has decided she deserves to die, and he decides, unilaterally, that she doesn't. He rewrites her self-image with a few sentences. Your death isn't the ending I want. Don't worry. In a world where gods watch humans suffering for entertainment, where the strong casually decide who lives and dies, a man kneeling to tell a frightened girl that she's worth saving is a genuinely revolutionary act. And the chapter is careful to make the stakes of that act crystal clear through the reveal of who Yuzong will become. The Beast Lord. One of the 100 strongest people in the world. This isn't a throwaway detail, it's the whole point. Dokja's kindness isn't just morally right, it's strategically brilliant, because he sees value where everyone else sees only threat. The catastrophe and the hero were always the same person. The only variable was whether anyone would choose to invest in her instead of executing her. Junghyuk tried to prevent the catastrophe by control and force and, ultimately, by considering her death. Dokja prevents it by belief, by resources, by refusing to let her become the thing the world expects. Same girl. Same power. Completely different destiny, decided by a single choice about how to see her. That's the quiet miracle at the center of this chapter, and it's why it resonates so deeply. The difference between a monster and a savior, the series suggests, is sometimes nothing more than whether one person decided to reach out a hand instead of drawing a blade. Chapter 93 settles into something quieter and stranger than the life or death choice that came before, and it uses that space to deepen everything, the bond between Kim Dokja and the child he saved, the mystery of who's watching him, and a brand new thread that spirals off into pure existential dread. It's a chapter about raising someone, believing in someone, and the terrifying question of whether the world itself is even real. We open in the aftermath of Dokja's decision. He's committed now, pouring resources into Yuzong Shin, acting as her supporting constellation even though, by his own admission, he can barely call himself one. He has no proper fable yet, no grand legend to his name, and a constellation without a stigma is a strange thing to be. But he does it anyway, spending coins freely, investing in this frightened little girl's future. And that generosity draws attention. A mysterious constellation calling itself the secretive plotter begins watching Dokja with great interest, even gifting him 1,000 coins. Dokja is baffled by it. Whoever this is spends money the same laid-back way he does, and carries himself like someone with a real, historical legend, yet Dokja can't find any trace of him in the novel he read. It's a lovely little hook, a watcher in the wings whose identity even the omniscient reader can't place. But the heart of the chapter is Yuzong, and her struggle to become the person Dokja believes she can be. Thanks to the growth packages he gifted her, her skills have shot up. She has innate talent for interspecies communication, the ability to tame monsters, and Dokja is sure she'll evolve into something extraordinary, maybe the only incarnation in Korea receiving this much support. On paper, she has everything she needs. But paper isn't the problem. The problem is inside her. We watch her try to tame a beast, activating her skill, reaching out to a monster with everything she's got. And it fails. The creature rampages, snarling, and she's forced to stab it to survive. It's a brutal, ugly moment, and it reveals the wound at the center of this child. She can't use her power properly, not because she lacks talent, but because of the trauma she's suffered. She's terrified. I'm scared, she admits, and those two small words carry the weight of everything this little girl has endured, alone, at the end of the world. Her gift and her fear are tangled together, and no amount of coins can simply buy that pain away. And this is where the chapter earns its emotional core, because it shows us why Yuzong is fighting through that fear at all. In a beautifully tender exchange, she reveals the depth of what Dokja's choice meant to her. She tells him, quietly, that she chose him over Soul, and that she doesn't regret it at all. Think about the weight of that. She was told she'd become a catastrophe that destroys a city, and given the choice between that terrible destiny and this strange man who refused to let her die, she chose him. She chose the person who believed in her. And now she's trying, through her fear and her trauma, to become someone worthy of that belief. It's the whole thesis of their relationship in a single line. The chapter also has real fun with the Dokja and Yuzong dynamic, and it's genuinely charming. Yuzong, it turns out, is a huge fan of Yu Jonghyuk, the way a little sister idolizes a cool older brother, tagging along in his shadow, certain he's the true hero of the story. And Dokja, ever the vain one, can't help fishing for compliments. He asks her how good-looking she thinks he is, insists he's never lacked interest in his own appearance, gets weirdly defensive when the answer doesn't flatter him enough. It's a wonderful, human bit of comedy in the middle of the apocalypse, a man who just made a life-altering moral stand also being petty about whether a kid thinks he's handsome. These little touches are what make Omniscient readers' viewpoint feel alive, characters who can be noble and ridiculous in the same breath. There's a quiet thread with Usanga too, praying to the gods of Olympus despite claiming she isn't religious, a small moment of hope and desperation in a world where the gods are horrifyingly real and always watching. It adds to the texture of a group trying to hold on to their humanity while the constellations turn their suffering into entertainment. And then the chapter takes its sharpest, strangest turn, introducing a new character who cracks the whole story open. Han Swyong. She's a writer, and she's convinced of something impossible and terrifying, that this reality is based on a novel. Her novel. She's paranoid, defensive, insisting she never plagiarized anything, and when Dokja probes her, she reveals a mind spinning with existential horror. She believes the world she's living in has overlapped with a story she wrote, and she can't tell anymore which came first. Has the novel bled into reality, or is reality turning into the novel? It's a dizzying, meta idea, and it hits especially hard in a series that's all about a reader trapped inside the book he read. Their conversation becomes a fascinating duel of writers and readers. Swyong can detect lies, and she uses that skill as they circle the question of authorship, of endings, of what it means to create a world. She talks about an ending she wants to see, an ending nobody has ever seen before. And Dokja, the ultimate reader, engages her on it, two people who both understand that stories have power, that endings matter, that the line between fiction and reality might be thinner than anyone wants to believe. For Swyong, the idea that her existence itself might be plagiarized, that she might be a recreation of a character from someone else's novel, is a special kind of nightmare. She keeps creating frustrating situations, and yet, she admits, it's strangely comforting to think this world is a work of fiction. Because if it's a story, then maybe it can be rewritten. Maybe none of the suffering is truly final. It's a rich, heady stretch of storytelling, the kind of philosophical spiraling that makes this series so special. But Omniscient readers' viewpoint never lets ideas float free of consequences, and the chapter drives that home with a brutal final beat. Dokja, exhausted from standing guard and raising an incarnation and interrogating a paranoid novelist, finally lets himself take a short rest. A brief, sweet slumber. And when he wakes up, the chapter delivers its gut punch. Han Swyong has become a corpse. The writer who was just debating the nature of reality, who believed the world was her novel, is dead. And the survival timer ticks down to 4 days. That ending recontextualizes the entire chapter with a jolt of horror. All that talk about stories and endings and whether the world is real, and now a real person is dead, murdered in the night while the group slept. Was it the survival scenario's penalties? Another survivor? Something worse? The chapter doesn't say. It just leaves you staring at a body and a countdown, the philosophical dread of a fictional world suddenly made viscerally, mortally real. What makes chapter 93 so good is how many notes it plays at once. It's a tender story about a broken child learning to trust the man who saved her. It's a comedy about a vain protagonist fishing for compliments. It's a mystery about a hidden constellation watching from the shadows. And it's a mind-bending horror about a woman who thinks reality is a novel, ending with her sudden, shocking death. All of it woven together, all of it building the sense that this world is deeper, stranger, and more dangerous than even Kim Dokja fully understands. He may have read the story. But chapter 93 is a reminder that stories can still surprise you, that characters can die when you're not looking, and that the most unsettling question in the whole apocalypse might not be how to survive it, but whether any of it is real at all. And through it all, there's Yuzong, scared but trying, choosing to believe in the man who chose to believe in her, the fragile, beating heart at the center of a world that keeps threatening to reveal itself as fiction. Let's linger on the Han Swyong thread, because it's one of the most quietly brilliant things Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint does, and this chapter is where it truly takes root. Here is a character who is a writer, dropped into a world that mirrors a novel she wrote, and slowly coming apart at the seams because she can no longer tell whether she's the author of this reality or a character trapped inside it. That's not just a cool premise. It's a mirror held up to Kim Dokja himself. Because Dokja is the reader of a novel that became his reality, and Swyong is, in a sense, its writer. The two of them are the two halves of every story, the one who creates and the one who consumes, and the apocalypse has trapped them both inside the pages. When they talk about plagiarism, about whose ideas came first, about whether her existence itself has been copied, they're really circling the deepest question the series can ask. If your whole life is a story someone else already told, do your choices still belong to you? Swyong finds it comforting to believe the world is fiction, because fiction can be rewritten, and a rewritten story means her suffering isn't the final word. But that same comfort is a horror, because if she's just a character, then her free will might be an illusion. The chapter holds both truths at once and refuses to resolve them, and that unresolved tension is exactly what makes the eventual discovery of her corpse land like a hammer. A woman debating whether she's real is suddenly, brutally, made mortal. And then there's the mystery of the secretive plotter, which the chapter plants so casually you might almost miss its significance. A constellation who spends coins the same laid-back way Dokja does, who carries the weight of a genuine historical legend, and yet who cannot be found anywhere in the novel Dokja has read 1,000 times. Think about what that means for an omniscient reader. Dokja's entire advantage, the thing that keeps him alive, is that he knows this story better than anyone. He has read every line. And here is a figure who exists outside his knowledge entirely, a blank space in a book he thought he had memorized. It's the first crack in his omniscience, the first hint that this world has grown beyond the pages he studied, that there are players on the board he never read about. That single detail plants a seed of unease that colors everything, because if Dokja doesn't know who this watcher is, then his greatest weapon, his knowledge, has limits. And in a world this deadly, the things you don't know are the things that kill you. But for all its cosmic mysteries and metafictional spirals, the beating heart of the chapter remains a small, scared girl learning to hope. Everything else orbits Yuzong. Her failed taming, her trauma, her terror, and then that quiet, devastating confession that she chose Dokja over an entire city and doesn't regret it. Sit with the enormity of that for a child. She was told she would become a monster that destroys soul, and offered the choice between that destiny and the man who refused to let her die, and she chose the man. She chose belief over fate. And now every time she tries to use her power and fails, every time the fear swallows her, she's not just fighting a monster or a skill check. She's fighting the story that says she's doomed to be terrible. Kim Dokja gave her a different story to believe in, one where she becomes strong, becomes good, becomes one of the 100 strongest people alive. And the whole tragedy and beauty of this chapter is watching her try, through her tears and her fear, to make his version of her true. The gods watch for entertainment. The writer despairs over authorship. The mysterious plotter schemes in the shadows. But underneath all of it, a little girl is simply trying to be brave for the one person who told her she was worth saving. And that, more than any philosophy, is what makes you keep reading. Chapter 94 opens on the shocking image the last chapter left us with, Han Swyong's lifeless body, and immediately begins pulling it apart into something far more clever and characteristic of this series. Because Kim Dokja, standing over the corpse in the cold morning light, doesn't just grieve. He investigates. And the reader in him notices what a normal person wouldn't. There are no wounds. If she's dead, it wasn't violence. It was something subtler. Poison. The stem of a plant called Yanasplita, slipped into the meal that was cooked the night before, the meal that Swyong herself prepared. And then the whole tragedy inverts into something almost comedic. Because this isn't Swyong's death at all. It's a trick. The body on the ground is one of her avatars, and avatars, the story reminds us, don't truly perish unless their heads are destroyed. Han Swyong, the paranoid novelist who believes this world might be her own fiction, has faked her own death and slipped away in the night, sacrificing an avatar and eating the penalties that come from breaking her temporary pledge just to make a clean exit. She got them good. Dokja can only sigh at the audacity of it, half annoyed and half impressed. But the trick leaves a genuinely melancholy question hanging in the air, and the chapter is smart enough to sit with it. If Swyong could sacrifice an avatar to leave whenever she wanted, if she truly had nothing to gain from staying with Dokja's group, then why did she stay as long as she did? She leaves behind a snarky little note and some coins, for your troubles, the kind of prickly gesture that tries to hide something softer underneath. And in her own thoughts, we get the real answer, a lonely, defensive wish that Dokja would at least pretend to come looking for her. That idiot, she thinks, shouldn't he at least act like he wants to find me? It's a beautifully human moment, two guarded people who don't know how to admit they've started to matter to each other, one of them running away specifically hoping to be chased. The chapter doesn't resolve it. It just plants the ache and moves on, trusting you to feel it. From there, the story pivots back to the heart of this arc, Kim Dokja's investment in Yuzong Shin. Her growth has been remarkable. Her mana and agility have already hit the scenario's maximum of 60, a staggering rate of development for a child everyone wanted dead a few days ago. And Dokja takes the next step, formalizing their bond with an actual support contract, officially becoming the supporter of the incarnation Yuzong Shin. It's a strange and wonderful position for him, an incarnation who now has his own incarnation beneath him, even though he isn't a constellation yet. He's building something unprecedented, a little hierarchy of belief with a saved orphan at its foundation. And the constellations, those cosmic spectators who feed on drama, absolutely love it. Many of them clamor to become Dokja's supporting constellations, drawn to this bizarre, generous, unpredictable man who spends coins like water and adopts doomed children. The mysterious secretive plotter is there again, watching, along with the prisoner of the golden headband, both showing interest, both congratulating him on his first support contract. Dokja gains coins, gains followers, gains momentum. His refusal to play the story the expected way is, paradoxically, making him more powerful than playing it straight ever could. The audience wants to see what the reader does next. Then the chapter turns to its central set piece, the crossing of the Han River. With every bridge destroyed, the group has no choice but to go through the water, and the water is full of monsters, massive ichthyosaurs breaching the surface like nightmares. Usanga proposes they simply swim across, which sounds insane, and the danger is very real. Danger strokes close in, the beasts circle, and the crossing becomes a gauntlet. But underneath the peril, Kim Dokja is running a plan, and it reveals the calculating strategist beneath his kindness. Because Dokja knows something the others don't fully grasp. There is no way a regular little girl could have survived alone until the 5th scenario. Yuzong already carries an extraordinary hidden power, her innate gift for interspecies communication, for taming monsters, and the only thing standing between her and that power is her trauma, her fear. So Dokja does something that looks cruel but is actually a kind of harsh mercy. He deliberately manufactures danger. He arranges the crossing so that Yuzong is thrown into a life-or-death situation, believing that only under that kind of pressure will her innate ability finally awaken. Make it look as if we're truly in danger, he plans, so that she has no choice but to reach for the power she's been too afraid to use. It's a gamble that trusts her strength even when she can't trust it herself. And the emotional core of the sequence is Dokja refusing to let her run. As the monsters close in and Yuzong panics, terrified, ready to flee, Dokja gives her the words that will define her. If you run now, he tells her, you'll never be able to go back. Don't run. Just do whatever you can. It's a brutal, loving push, the same lesson at the heart of the whole series, that the only way past fear is through it, that running from the thing that terrifies you only makes it your master forever. He's not abandoning her to the danger. He's standing right there, believing in her, forcing her to discover that she's stronger than her trauma told her she was. And she rises to it. Under the crushing pressure, with nowhere left to run, Yuzong Shin activates advanced interspecies communication, her power surging to a new level. She reaches out to the monsters in the water, and instead of being devoured, she commands. The very beasts that were hunting them bend to her will. A massive creature answers her call, and the girl who was too scared to tame a single fox is suddenly bending the terrors of the Han River to her voice. It's a triumphant, cathartic payoff, the moment Dokja's faith and Yuzong's courage finally meet and ignite. The chapter ends with the awesome image of that power made manifest, a huge monster surfacing under Yuzong's command, the survival timer ticking down to 4 days, and the sense that something enormous has shifted. The frightened orphan is becoming the beast lord in real time, right before our eyes, and it's happening because one man refused to accept the ending everyone else took for granted. What makes chapter 94 so satisfying is how it weaves together all the different threads of who Kim Dokja is. He's the sharp-eyed reader who solves a fake death from the absence of wounds. He's the generous fool who spends fortunes on a doomed child and delights the watching gods. He's the cold strategist who engineers a deadly scenario to force a breakthrough. And he's the fierce believer who plants himself in front of a terrified little girl and refuses to let her run from her own strength. All of those facets, working at once, in service of a single stubborn conviction, that Yuzong Shin is worth saving, and more than that, worth building into something magnificent. And running underneath it all is that quiet, aching thread of Han Swyong, the woman who faked her death to escape, secretly hoping to be pursued. It's a reminder that even in a world of catastrophes and cosmic spectators, the deepest drama is often just people struggling to admit they care about each other. Chapter 94 gives you monsters and river crossings and awakening powers, but it never loses sight of the human hearts driving all of it, the orphan learning to be brave, the reader learning to be a leader, and the lonely novelist walking away into the ruins, hoping someone will notice she's gone. It's the series firing on every cylinder at once, action and philosophy and tenderness braided into a single current, sweeping you toward whatever flood is coming next. It's worth pausing on the deeper meaning of Dokja's support contract with Yuzong, because it represents something the series cares about a great deal. In This apocalypse, the relationship between constellations and incarnations is usually one of ownership, of a powerful god using a weaker human as a piece on a board, sponsoring them only for the entertainment and glory they provide. But what Dokja builds with Yuzong is the inversion of that. He doesn't sponsor her to use her. He sponsors her to protect her, to give her a foundation to grow from, to be the sky she reaches toward rather than the hand that controls her. He even reassures her that he won't meddle in her affairs the way other constellations do, that he simply wants her to become strong and safe. That distinction matters enormously, because it defines the kind of leader Dokja is choosing to be. In a world built on exploitation, he's building something closer to family. And the constellations, ironically, adore him for it, because genuine devotion is a rarer and more compelling story than mere domination. Watching a man pour his own resources into a doomed child, asking nothing in return but her survival, is exactly the kind of narrative the cosmos can't look away from. Dokja weaponizes decency itself, turning simple kindness into a source of power, and that paradox sits right at the heart of what makes him such a singular protagonist. Chapter 95 is the moment a scared little girl becomes a legend, and it earns that transformation with one of the most stirring awakening sequences in this entire stretch of omniscient reader's viewpoint. It picks up in the chaos of the Han River crossing, monsters everywhere, water churning, and Kim Dokja doing the hardest, strangest thing a mentor can do, deliberately pushing a traumatized child to the very edge of her fear. Because Dokja understands something crucial about how power works in this world. Yuzong's gift won't awaken from comfort. It will awaken from desperation. So he pushes her, hard. Be more anxious, he tells her. Be more eager. And more desperate. It sounds almost cruel, a grown man deliberately cranking up a child's terror in the middle of a monster-infested river. But it's not cruelty, it's a brutal kind of faith. He's read this story. He knows what she can become. And he knows the only way to get her there is to strip away every safety net until she has no choice but to reach for the power buried inside her. He even worries, in his own head, that the situation isn't dramatic enough yet, that he needs to make it feel truly life or death for the breakthrough to happen. And then it happens. Under the crushing weight of that manufactured desperation, something in Yuzong finally breaks open. A skill activates, the blade of faith. Her attribute nears evolution. She enters a trance, her fear burning away into something vast and calm and ancient. Her taming power surges to a new level, and the frightened orphan who couldn't tame a single fox reaches out across the water and seizes the minds of monsters. A Tier 5 sea monster, a colossal queen called Morana, answers her call, bending to the will of a child who days ago wanted to die. It's a genuinely breathtaking sequence. The panels swell with light and scale as Yuzong ascends into her true nature, and the system itself names what she's becoming. The Beast Lord. The ruler of all monsters. The very title the story promised she would grow into is now manifesting in real time, born not from violence but from a terrified girl finding, at the bottom of her fear, a wellspring of impossible strength. And the whole group can only stare. This really is amazing, someone marvels. They knew she had potential. But not like this. Not this soon. Not this enormous. The image the chapter gives us is unforgettable, the group crossing the ruined Han River on the back of the Sea Queen Yuzong tamed, riding a monster through a drowned city like something out of myth. The little orphan who bowed and thanked strangers for blankets is now commanding leviathans. It's the payoff of everything Dokja bet on, the proof that his mercy wasn't weakness but foresight, that the catastrophe everyone wanted to kill was always a savior waiting for someone to believe in her. But what makes Chapter 95 great isn't just the spectacle. It's the tenderness that immediately follows. Because the second the crisis passes, Dokja stops being the ruthless strategist and becomes something gentler. He reaches out and pats Yuzong on the head. You did good, he tells her. Simple words, but for a child who has spent her whole apocalypse being told she's a monster, they're everything. The narration notes she's at an age where compliments can go a long, long way, and you feel the truth of it. She just tamed a tier 5 monster and reshaped her own destiny, and the thing that lights her up is a kind man telling her she did well. Usanga smiles, noting how happy Dokja looks, and for a moment the brutal apocalypse gives way to something almost like family. A guardian proud of the child he chose to save. Then the chapter shifts gears entirely, into the kind of heady, philosophical territory that makes this series so distinctive. Because Usanga is worried, and her worry is a good one. If everything is supposed to go according to the novel, then even if they save this Yuzang, wouldn't the catastrophe from the future still exist? Wouldn't fate simply find another way? It's the question that's been haunting the whole arc, the fear that Dokja's mercy is futile against a fixed destiny. And Dokja answers it with something wonderful, a piece of in-universe theory called the disconnected film theory, created, he notes, by the author of the very novel this world is based on. He explains it with a beautiful metaphor. Imagine a person's life as a roll of film. There are as many films as there are worlds, countless parallel realities, each with its own version of Yuzang. Their Yuzang is film number 1. But there are numerous other Yuzangs playing out in other realities. And here's the key. Because these films exist independently of one another, nothing that happens to their Yuzang, film number 1, can affect the catastrophe Yuzang in some other world. They're separate reels. The tragedy of one timeline doesn't automatically dictate another. It's a dizzying, elegant idea, and it does two things at once. On the surface, it reassures Sangha, and Dokja, that saving this particular girl is meaningful, that her fate isn't chained to some other version of herself in a different world. But underneath, it deepens the whole existential mystery of the series. Because if there are countless films, countless Yuzangs, countless worlds, then which one is real? And the chapter can't resist the meta joke that lands the whole thing. When Sangha marvels that Dokja knows so much, someone points out that of course she's never heard of the theory, it was created by the author of the novel Dokja read. It's a perfect omniscient reader's viewpoint moment, the reader wielding an author's own philosophy as a practical tool for survival, the line between fiction and reality blurring into something you can actually use. The theory also plants a seed of unease that lingers. Because if their Yuzang is just one film among many, if the real could be spliced, burned, replaced, then how stable is any of this? The paradox hangs there, unresolved, the idea that changing the present Yuzang might not change the future one at all, that they might be fighting a catastrophe that exists in a realm their choices can't reach. It's classic ORV, wrapping a warm emotional victory inside a cold philosophical puzzle, never quite letting you feel safe. The group finally reaches solid ground, a sign marking Yongsan, the crossing survived, Yuzang transformed, the theory debated. For a breath, it feels like they've made it through the worst. And then, because this is the apocalypse, the chapter yanks the safety away one more time. A rustle in the dark. A monster. Something enormous unfolding out of the shadows of the ruined city. And it resolves into a horror of impossible scale, a giant praying mantis, towering over Dokja and Yuzang, its bladed arms gleaming. A giant praying mantis, someone breathes, and the chapter slams shut on that reveal, the survival timer reading 4 days, a new nightmare looming over the exhausted group just when they thought they'd earned a moment's peace. What makes chapter 95 so strong is the sheer range of it. It's a triumphant awakening, a scared child ascending into the beast lord through sheer desperate courage. It's a tender character moment, a guardian patting a proud child's head and telling her she did good. It's a mind-bending philosophical lecture on parallel worlds and the nature of fate, delivered as casually as a survival tip. And it's a horror cliffhanger, a monstrous mantis rising to threaten everything. All of it flows together seamlessly, held up by the central relationship between a man who refused to give up on a doomed girl and the girl who's becoming a legend to honor that faith. And underneath it all runs the theme that makes this arc sing. Yuzong's power didn't come from being told she was strong. It came from being pushed to the edge by someone who believed she could fly, and then catching her when she did. Dokja manufactured her desperation, yes, but only because he'd already decided to build her back up afterward, to pat her head and tell her she did well, to give her a reason to want to be strong at all. The Beast Lord isn't born from cruelty or trauma. She's born from a strange, harsh, deeply human kind of love, the love of a man who saw a catastrophe and chose to raise a hero instead. As the giant mantis looms and the timer ticks down, you're left certain of one thing. Whatever comes next, Yuzong Shin is no longer the girl who wanted to die. She's the ruler of monsters now, and she has someone worth protecting. And that changes everything about the flood that's still coming. It's worth dwelling longer on the disconnected film theory, because it's one of those ideas that rewards a second look, and it quietly encodes the entire philosophy of the series. Think about what it's really saying. Every life is a strip of film, every world its own separate reel, and the projector of fate runs each one independently. The catastrophe Yuzong of some other timeline and the frightened, growing Yuzong riding a sea queen across the Han River are not the same person, no matter how identical they look. They are different films, and what happens on one reel cannot rewrite another. On its surface this is a comfort, Dokja's way of telling Sangha that saving this girl matters, that her fate isn't handcuffed to a monster in a parallel world. But look closer and it becomes something profound about choice itself. If every version of a person is a separate film, then the version you become is not predetermined by any other version. Your reel is yours. The catastrophe was never Yuzong's destiny, it was just one possible cut of the film, and the cut playing out here, the one where a man believed in her and a girl chose to be brave, is every bit as real and valid as the tragic one. That's the deepest argument the series keeps making, dressed up as a piece of in-universe theory. Fate is not a single fixed reel. It's a library of possibilities, and the one that plays is the one you choose to live. Dokja read the tragic cut. He simply refuses to screen it. And the beautiful irony that lands the whole scene is that this liberating theory was written by the author of the very novel Dokja read, meaning the reader is using the author's own words to defy the ending the author wrote. It's omniscient reader's viewpoint in miniature, a story about the power of a reader to reach into a fixed narrative and, through sheer stubborn love, splice together a better ending than the one on the page. Chapter 96 is a chapter of preparation, of connection, and of dread, the deep breath before the final plunge. It slows the pace after the spectacle of Yuzong's awakening to focus on something quieter but no less important, the web of relationships and looming threats that will define everything to come. And it ends by pulling back the curtain on the true scope of the danger the group has been living inside all along. It opens with Kim Dokja reaching out across the ruins, reconnecting with people from before. A text message arrives, and it's from Han Dong-hoon, an old contact, nice to see you again, threading through the static of a broken world. In an apocalypse that has severed nearly every human connection, the simple act of a message getting through carries real weight. Dokja is quietly building a network, gathering threads of the old world and the people in it, because he knows that survival isn't a solo act. It's about who stands with you when the sky falls. That theme deepens with the subplot of the Wanderers and their king. Word comes that Hui-Wan is in the north, where the king of the Wanderers holds sway, and the group discusses making contact, forging alliances, positioning themselves for what's coming. Dokja advises them to stay put for now, to maximize their skill levels, to push their stats as high as they can while there's still time. It's the calm, methodical planning of someone who knows a storm is bearing down and wants everyone as strong as possible when it hits. But the most affecting thread here is about family. Dokja gently tells you Sangha to warn her family, to get them ready, because once this scenario ends, the outer suburbs of Seoul won't be safe anymore. It's a heavy thing to say to someone, a quiet acknowledgement that the world is about to get worse, that the people you love need to brace for it. Sanga's family is in Seoul, and there's a tender, anxious hope in the way she holds on to the belief that they'll be fine. In the middle of all the monsters and cosmic games, the series never forgets the smaller, more human terror, the fear for the people you can't protect, the ones out there somewhere in the dark while you fight to survive. It grounds the apocalypse in something everyone understands. And then Chapter 96 delivers its centerpiece, a revelation that recontextualizes the entire arc and expands the stakes to a terrifying scale. The 5 catastrophes. The story lays them out one by one, like the tolling of a great bell. The catastrophe from the flaming depths of hell, of the south. The catastrophe of questions, of the east. The catastrophe of ice, of the west. The catastrophe of water, of the north. 4 of the 5 great catastrophes of this scenario have already been taken care of, dealt with across the journey so far. And now, the narration intones, only one remains. The catastrophe of floods. It's a chilling reframe, because it reveals that everything the group has survived was building toward this single final threat. And the image the chapter gives us is pure ominous dread, a massive red egg, a cocoon, pulsing in the dark with a heavy, living thump. Something is hatching. The last and most dangerous catastrophe is about to be born, and the group is standing right in its path. The peace they've clawed out, the crossing they survived, Yuzong's awakening, all of it was just the prelude to this. The flood is coming. The chapter balances that dread with some genuinely delightful character work, because omniscient reader's viewpoint always knows when to let its cast breathe. Yuzong continues her training, growing stronger, and we get a wonderful new dynamic in the form of a rival, a boy with the power to command insects, a kind of mirror to Yuzong's mastery over beasts. Like recognizes like, someone notes, the beast master and the insect master, 2 children with monstrous gifts sizing each other up. And it's adorable. They bicker, they glare, they squabble over the most important question in any child's world, which of them Dokja actually likes better. This bug boy insists he knows who Dokja prefers. Yuzong fires back, and the 2 of them spark off each other with the petty intensity only kids can muster. It's a lovely pocket of warmth, a reminder that even the most powerful beings in this world are, underneath it all, children who just want to matter to someone. There's comedy in the adults too, Dokja fending off the insect boy's hostility, the group's easy banter, the small human textures that make these characters feel real. It's the calm before the storm, and the chapter uses it well, letting you love these people a little more right before it puts them in mortal danger. And then the machinery of the scenario clicks into motion. The sub-scenario, survival activities, is finally completed, 10 days of eating and sleeping and paying survival fees and fighting off monsters, all survived. And with its completion, the Dakibi arrives, the cosmic game master, announcing the next phase with theatrical relish. I must have kept you all waiting, it says. Did you enjoy your survival activities? At long last, the 5th scenario, the one everyone has been building toward, is about to begin. But before it does, there's one last event, and it's a crucial one, the second support selection. This is the moment when constellations across the cosmos choose which incarnations to back, pouring their power and patronage into the mortals they find most compelling. It's a pivotal opportunity, a chance to gain sponsors and strength before the final catastrophe hits. And the Dakibi frames the stakes with chilling clarity. The group has accomplished a great deal, defeated 4 of the 5 catastrophes, racked up an impressive tally. But the Dakibi warns them not to get comfortable. Depending on how they do in this coming scenario, everything they've accomplished up to this point may turn out to be futile. Everything might even come to an end. It's a stark, sobering warning, the sense that all their victories could be erased in a single catastrophe, that the real test is only now beginning. And yet the Dakibi offers a sliver of hope, in its own unsettling way. Luckily for them, it says, there are beings out there who pity the situation they're in, constellations willing to lend their strength. And so, with a theatrical snap, the second support selection begins, and the path to the fifth scenario opens. What makes Chapter 96 so effective is how it functions as a hinge. It closes out one phase of the story, the survival activities, the raising of Yuzong, the aftermath of Han Suyong's departure, and opens the door to the next, the fifth scenario and its final catastrophe. It takes stock of everything the group has, the alliances, the growing power, the bonds, the family they're fighting to protect, and then it reveals the enormity of what they're about to face. The 5 catastrophes framing makes the whole apocalypse suddenly feel vast and structured, a series of world-ending threats the group has been navigating without fully grasping the shape of it. And now, with 4 down and 1 to go, the finish line of this scenario is in sight, but so is its most dangerous obstacle. The genius is in the balance. The chapter gives you the warmth of reconnection, old friends texting through the ruins, a mother worrying about her family, 2 children squabbling over who's the favorite. And it wraps all that tenderness inside a mounting dread, the hatching red egg, the coming flood, the Dakibi's warning that everything could still come to nothing. That contrast is what makes the stakes land. You care about these people, their bonds, their small joys, their families out in the dark. And the chapter has just told you that all of it hangs on surviving one final catastrophe, the flood that's about to break over everything they've built. By the time the Dakibi snaps its fingers and the second support selection begins, the whole story has coiled tight with anticipation. Yuzong is the beast lord now. Dokja has his network, his allies, his coins, his stubborn faith. The group is as ready as they'll ever be. But the catastrophe of floods is the last and greatest of the 5, and the Dakibi's warning hangs over everything, a promise that the hardest part is still to come. Chapter 96 is the quiet, purposeful gathering of strength and heart before the final storm, and it leaves you certain that when the flood finally breaks, it will test everything, every bond, every power, every ounce of the belief that carried these characters this far. There's a subtle brilliance in how this chapter uses the 5 catastrophes to reframe the entire journey in hindsight. Up to now, the group's struggles have felt like a series of separate crises, one desperate fight after another, survival for its own sake. But by naming the catastrophes and revealing that 4 of the 5 have already fallen, the story retroactively transforms all that chaos into a coherent campaign, a war with a shape and an endgame. It's a masterful bit of structure, the kind of reveal that makes you want to go back and see everything that came before in a new light. The flaming depths of the south, the questions of the east, the ice of the west, the water of the north, each a titanic threat, each already overcome, whether the reader fully realized it or not. And now the map has only one marker left, glowing red and terrible. The catastrophe of floods. Framing it this way does something clever to the tension, too. It tells you the finish line is close, that this scenario is nearly complete, while simultaneously warning you that the last obstacle is the deadliest of them all. Hope and dread in the same breath. The group has come so far, survived so much, that the idea of losing it all now to a single final catastrophe feels almost unbearable, and that unbearable stakes is exactly what the chapter wants you feeling as the Dakibi's fingers snap and the last scenario begins. Everything they've built, every bond, every hard-won ounce of strength, is about to be thrown against the flood, and the story has made absolutely sure you understand there are no guarantees any of it survives. Chapter 97 is Kim Dokja at his most gloriously, audaciously clever, a chapter that turns a moment of supposed opportunity into an elaborate con, and it's a joy to watch unfold. It centers on the second support selection, the event where constellations across the cosmos choose which incarnations to sponsor, pouring their power into the mortals they find most worthy. For most people, this is the golden ticket, the chance to gain a powerful patron. For Kim Dokja, it's a chessboard, and he's about to play every piece at once. The chapter opens with the beautiful, ominous spectacle of it. The number of stars appearing above a person's head reflects how many constellations want to support them, and the sky fills with light as the cosmos places its bets. Dokja is drowning in attention, so many constellations circling him that his companion jokes he looks like a Christmas tree. And the roster watching him is staggering. The chapter scrolls through them like a hall of gods, the prisoner of the golden headband, the abyssal black flame dragon, the mysterious secretive plotter, and then climbing into truly rarefied territory, the scribe of heaven, and finally a name that stops the breath. Archangel Metatron. Heaven's right hand, one of the most powerful constellations of the pure good alignment, outranking even other great angels. The most powerful beings in existence are watching this one strange incarnation, wondering what he'll do next. And what he does is refuse them all. This is the heart of the chapter's genius. Despite having his pick of the most powerful patrons in the cosmos, Kim Dokja declines to choose a single supporting constellation. Again. He's done this before, and he does it once more, and it throws the watching gods into an uproar. Why would an incarnation reject the patronage of Metatron himself? The answer is pure Dokja. Because being sponsored means being owned, being placed under a constellation's influence, becoming a piece in someone else's story. And Kim Dokja refuses to be anyone's piece. He'd rather stay independent, unbound, free to make his own choices, even if it means turning down the strength that could keep him alive. It's a stubborn, almost reckless commitment to his own autonomy, and it's central to who he is. But refusing the gods isn't a passive act of defiance. It's the opening move of a scheme, and the chapter slowly reveals just how many layers deep it goes. There's the matter of Baihyung's channel, the Dakibi who promised to make a special selection if his channel hit 10,000 subscribers. Dokja made a deal tied to that promise. And as the timer counts down, Dokja's subscriber count climbs, 9,000, then higher, constellations competing to donate, the number creeping toward the magic 10,000. 9,990. 9,995. 9,999. And then it stops. Stuck, one agonizing subscriber short. Except it's not an accident. It's the con revealed. From the very beginning, the maximum possible subscriber count for Baihyung's channel was rigged at 9,999. It could never reach 10,000. The whole thing was a setup between Dokja and the Dakibi, a piece of theater designed so that Dokja would never technically have to fulfill the promise of choosing a partner, while still reaping every benefit of the frenzy the event generated. He orchestrated a situation where he gets all the attention, all the donations, all the leverage, and none of the obligation. It's a beautiful, intricate swindle, and watching it click into place is deeply satisfying. But Dokja isn't done. Because refusing the constellations doesn't just frustrate them, it enrages some of them, and Dokja weaponizes that rage. His refusal triggers a new event, and it's a doozy. A bounty scenario, called Divine Punishment. The clear condition is chilling in its simplicity: deliver a brutal and ruthless death to the incarnation Kim Dokja. The more brutally he dies, the more coins the killer earns. Time limit, 20 minutes. Reward, tens of thousands of coins, maybe more. Kim Dokja has, quite deliberately, made himself the most valuable target in the apocalypse. He's put a bounty on his own head. It sounds insane, and the chapter lets the danger feel real. Other incarnations, tempted by the enormous reward, come for him. 40,000 coins for his death is a fortune nobody can ignore, and suddenly Dokja is being chased through the ruins, hunted by his own people, constellations applying penalties to slow him down, sap his defense, weaken his attacks. He's headed toward the Han River with nowhere to run, pursuers closing in, the whole thing looking like a catastrophic miscalculation. But of course, it isn't. Every part of this is the plan. By making himself a bounty, Dokja turns the constellation's bloodlust into a coin-generating machine, farming resources from the chaos, some constellations paying for his death while others, moved to pity, gift him coins to survive. He plays both sides of his own execution. And the destination he's running toward isn't an escape route, it's a trap of his own making. The Han River. Where Queen Morina, the Tier 5 sea monster that Yuzong tamed, lies waiting. The climax is pure spectacle and pure cleverness fused together. Dokja leads his hunters right to the water's edge, and just as it looks like he's cornered, he leaps toward the river. Has he lost his mind, his pursuers scream, watching him seemingly throw himself to his doom. Splash! And then the water erupts, and the tamed Leviathan rises with a world-shaking roar, the monster under Yuzong's command surging up to turn the whole situation on its head. The constellations become ecstatic at the spectacle. Dokja activates his bookmark skill, a character bookmark, pulling another thread of his plan tight. The hunters who thought they'd cornered easy prey suddenly find themselves at the mercy of a monster, and Dokja, floating amid the chaos he engineered, has turned his own bounty into a triumph. What makes Chapter 97 so delicious is how completely it lets Kim Dokja be the trickster genius at the core of his character. This is a man who was offered the patronage of literal archangels and turned it down to stay free. Who rigged a subscriber count to escape an obligation while reaping its rewards. Who put a bounty on his own head to farm coins from the constellation's bloodlust. Who lured his would-be killers into the jaws of a monster he raised through kindness. Every single beat is Dokja using the system's own rules against it, refusing to play the game the way it's meant to be played, and coming out ahead precisely because no one can predict a man who reads the story from the outside. And beneath the cleverness, the chapter never loses the thread of who Dokja is protecting. He sends Sangha and the children to hide before he springs his trap, keeping them safe while he makes himself the target. He does have a plan, he assures them, and tells them to stay hidden until he gives the signal. His recklessness isn't carelessness, it's calculated to draw all the danger onto himself and away from the people he's sworn to protect. He becomes the bait so the ones he loves don't have to. That's the quiet nobility underneath all the trickery, a man willing to put a bounty on his own head so that a scared little girl and a worried woman can stay out of the crossfire. The chapter also deepens the sense of the vast, watching cosmos that surrounds these characters. The parade of powerful constellations, Metatron, the scribe of heaven, the whole hierarchy of gods leaning in to watch a single stubborn incarnation, makes Dokja's defiance feel genuinely audacious. He's not just outsmarting a few enemies. He's dancing on the edge of the attention of beings who could erase him with a thought, and doing it with a grin. The constellations are ecstatic because they've never seen anything like him, a mortal who treats the machinery of the gods as a game to be gamed, and their fascination is its own kind of power, drawing coins and influence to a man who refuses to bow to any of them. By the time the tamed monster rises from the Han River and the bounty scenario reaches its chaotic peak, Chapter 97 has delivered one of the most purely entertaining stretches of the whole arc. It's a heist, a chase, a monster spectacle, and a character study all at once, every piece of it demonstrating why Kim Dokja is such a singular protagonist. He turned down heaven's angels, rigged a cosmic game, monetized his own assassination, and weaponized the kindness he showed a doomed child, all in service of staying free and keeping his people safe. As the water churns and the constellations roar their approval, you're left grinning at the sheer nerve of it, and bracing for the final catastrophe that still waits on the horizon. The flood is coming. But first, the reader just showed the entire cosmos exactly what happens when you try to put a leash on a man who's already read the ending. Step back and consider the sheer audacity of what Dokja pulls off here, because it's a masterclass in turning weakness into strength. Every single disadvantage in his situation, he converts into an asset. The constellation's obsession with him, which could be suffocating, becomes a flood of donations. The obligation to pick a patron, which could bind him, gets neutralized by a rigged number that lets him keep the benefits and dodge the cost. The bounty on his head, which should be a death sentence, becomes a coin farming engine and a way to lure his enemies exactly where he wants them. Even his refusal to choose a constellation, which enrages the gods, is really just him protecting the thing he values most, his freedom to write his own story. It's the philosophy of the whole series in miniature. A character trapped inside a plot reacts to what happens to them. A reader standing outside the plot manipulates the machinery itself, bending every rule and expectation to his own ends. Dokja is surrounded by beings infinitely more powerful than himself, archangels and ancient gods who could unmake him with a thought, and he dances between them untouched, not because he's stronger, but because he understands the game better than the people who built it. That's the intoxicating fantasy at the heart of omniscient readers' viewpoint, the idea that knowledge and nerve can beat raw power, that the person who truly understands the story always has the advantage, no matter how outmatched they look on paper. Chapter 98 pushes the story toward its final confrontation, and it does so by showcasing one of Kim Dokja's most fascinating abilities, along with introducing a dangerous new player who threatens to upend everything. It's a chapter about borrowed power, desperate races, and the way a single target painted on your back can turn an entire island against you. It opens with Dokja making clever use of his bookmark skill, a power that lets him temporarily borrow the abilities of characters he's bookmarked. He has a limited number of slots, filled with an assortment of dangerous names, and he makes a swap, removing one to insert a new entry, the Beast Tamer, Yuzong Shin. Bookmark activated. And suddenly Dokja can wield Yuzong's advanced interspecies communication himself, for a limited window of 30 minutes. It's a striking moment, because it means Dokja isn't just Yuzong's protector, he's now channeling the very power he nurtured in her, the student's gift flowing back through the teacher. The experience of it is rendered beautifully. Dokja can feel the circuitry of his own brain synchronizing with the monsters, sensing their emotions, the scent of their fear and hunger and rage. He's not just controlling beasts, he's touching their minds, feeling what they feel. And with that borrowed power, he summons a sea monster of his own, a great queen of the deep, and commands her to carry him across the flooded ruins. Whoosh! He races over the water at breakneck speed, so fast that his companions can barely keep up, someone begging him to slow down as he tears toward his destination. It's a thrilling, propulsive sequence, Dokja riding a leviathan through a drowned city, powered by the gift he gave a frightened little girl. When the bookmark's duration runs out, the borrowed power fades, and Dokja can still use the skills but not with the same proficiency, a reminder that this strength is temporary, a tool rather than a possession. But it's gotten him where he needs to go, to Nodol Island, a place in the southwestern reaches of Yongsan, where the final Catastrophe's meteorite should be. This is the heart of it, the place where the last of the 5 catastrophes, the catastrophe of floods, is destined to fully awaken. And Dokja has come to meet it head-on. But Nodol Island isn't empty, and here the chapter's central tension emerges. Because Dokja still carries the target mark from the bounty he provoked earlier, that glowing invitation for anyone to kill him for a fortune in coins. And the island is full of other survivors, other incarnations, some of whom see that mark and smell opportunity. Dokja tries to clear them out, telling them to leave, asking almost politely at first. "Get off the island," he says, "I'm asking nicely." But politeness has limits in the apocalypse, and the confrontation escalates fast. "Who the hell are you?" someone snarls, ready to make Dokja pay for his arrogance. And then the chapter introduces its dangerous new figure, and the temperature drops. A blade flashes, shing, and a powerful new incarnation steps into the scene, a striking white-haired woman with a fearsome reputation. "That's her," someone gasps, the naval warfare god. She's a heavyweight, a warrior blessed with formidable power and, more unsettlingly, a form of future vision, the ability to see what's coming before it arrives. In a world where knowledge is the ultimate weapon, an enemy who can glimpse the future is a genuine threat even to a reader like Dokja, whose whole advantage is knowing the story in advance. Suddenly there are two people on this island who can see ahead, and they don't yet know whether they're enemies or allies. The naval warfare god cuts through the chaos, scattering the lesser hunters, and turns her attention to Dokja and his target mark. "What's the use of hiding," she asks, "when you have that mark on you?" It's a pointed question, and it frames the danger perfectly. The bounty has made Dokja impossible to ignore, a beacon drawing every predator on the island. And this particular predator is one of the most dangerous he's faced, a god of naval warfare with a sword and a window into the future. The confrontation crackles with uncertainty, neither quite sure of the other, both aware that the wrong move could be fatal. The chapter weaves in other threads that widen the scope of the coming clash. There's a military element, a lieutenant from a survivor unit, a man of order trying to escort civilians to safety and warning against rebelling against government authority, the remnants of the old world structures clinging to relevance in the new chaos. And there's an emotional thread too, because someone recognizes Dokja with desperate hope, a familiar face crying out his name, relieved to find an ally amid the danger. These connections, some old, some new, populate the island with the sense of a world where everyone is scrambling to survive the same approaching catastrophe, some as allies, some as threats, all drawn to the same deadly point. And beneath it all pulses the true objective, the catastrophe meteorite itself. A golden meteorite, the seed of the flood catastrophe, glowing within its cocoon. Yu Junghyuk has a plan, a grim and pragmatic one, to feed the scenario guide's meteorite to the catastrophe, a gambit rooted in his countless regressions, his hard-won knowledge of how this final threat can be managed. It's the kind of ruthless, experienced strategy that contrasts with Dokja's more improvisational cleverness, the regressor and the reader once again approaching the same problem from opposite directions, their methods clashing even as their goal aligns. There's also the tender thread of Yuzong searching for Yu Junghyuk, the little beast lord looking for the swordsman she idolizes, wanting to be near her master as the danger mounts. It's a small, human note amid the grand strategy, a reminder that even as these characters wield world-shaking powers and confront gods, they're still people with attachments, a child wanting to find the person she looks up to, a group of survivors trying to stay together as the final storm gathers. What makes Chapter 98 so compelling is how it layers all of these elements into a mounting sense of convergence. Everything is pulling toward Nodul Island and the meteorite at its heart. Dokja's borrowed power got him there. His bounty mark has painted a target that draws enemies to the same spot. The naval warfare god, with her blade and her future sight, is a wild card who could tip the balance either way. Junghyuk's plan for the meteorite looms as the intended endgame. And the catastrophe of floods, the last of the five, waits in its golden shell, ready to break. The chapter is a gathering of forces, tightening every thread toward a collision that promises to be enormous. And through it all, the series keeps demonstrating what makes Kim Dokja such a singular figure. He borrows the power of the child he saved, turning his own act of kindness into a practical weapon. He walks onto a hostile island wearing a target he chose to put on himself, confident he can turn even that liability into an advantage. He faces down a god who can see the future with nothing but his own deeper knowledge of the story. He's a man perpetually playing a more complicated game than everyone around him, and even when he's outnumbered and outgunned and marked for death, you never quite believe he's cornered, because Dokja's cornered moments are usually just the setup for his next impossible trick. By the time Chapter 98 reaches its end, all the pieces are in position for the confrontation the whole arc has been building toward. The meteorite glows. The naval warfare god stands ready, blade drawn, future sight active. The bounty hunters circle. Junghyuk's plan waits to unfold. And Kim Dokja stands in the middle of it all, marked for death, borrowing the power of monsters, refusing to back down from a god. The catastrophe of floods is about to break over Nodul Island, and everyone who matters is converging on the same deadly patch of ground. Chapter 98 is the tightening of the noose. Before the final plunge, every thread pulled taut, every player in place, the last catastrophe of the fifth scenario about to erupt into something no one on that island will walk away from unchanged. And you finish it certain that whatever happens next, it's going to be enormous, and that Dokja, marked and outnumbered and facing a god who sees the future, is exactly where he wants to be. It's worth appreciating how this chapter uses the idea of borrowed power to say something about who Dokja is at his core. The bookmark skill lets him wear other people's abilities like borrowed coats, and there's something telling in that. Dokja's own raw strength has never been his weapon. His power has always been relational, built from the people he gathers, the bonds he forms, the strength he nurtures in others and can call upon when it matters. When he borrows Yuzong's taming to command a leviathan, he's not just using a skill, he's drawing on the fruit of his own kindness, the gift he planted in a frightened child now bearing power he can wield. It's the opposite of a lone hero fantasy. Dokja is strong precisely because he refused to be alone, because he invested in others, because the little girl he saved grew into someone whose strength now flows back to him. That's the quiet argument threaded through all the action of this chapter, that real power in this brutal world isn't something you hoard, it's something you cultivate in the people around you, and it comes back to you when you need it most. Chapter 99 is a gut-wrenching, soul-deep tragedy, one of the most emotionally devastating chapters in this entire arc, and it recontextualizes everything the story has been building toward with a single shattering revelation. It's a chapter about the terrible cost of devotion, the cruelty of a man who lives only for himself, and a death that becomes something more than death. It begins with the plan reaching its critical moment, feeding the scenario guide's meteorite to the catastrophe, awakening it prematurely to face it on their own terms. The great golden meteorite pulses, the catastrophe of floods stirs within its cocoon, and the tension coils tight. But the true weight of the chapter lands with the identity of the white-haired warrior, the naval warfare god, and it's a revelation that turns the whole arc inside out. Because she is Yuzong Shin. Not the child Dokja saved. Another Yuzong, from another round. She is the Yuzong Shin of Yu Junghyuk's second regression, sent back into the past by Junghyuk himself in a distant round, and she wandered the labyrinth of worlds for thousands upon thousands of years before returning, transformed, as the catastrophe of floods. The little orphan Dokja is raising and the world-ending catastrophe-threatening soul are the same person, separated by different timelines and an ocean of suffering. The disconnected film theory made flesh, one reel of Yuzong's life playing out as a saved child, another as a doomed god. And her story is almost unbearable to hear. She loved Junghyuk. She calls him captain, and in that single word lives thousands of years of devotion. She endured centuries for humanity's sake, another 200 years to protect the world, wandering through endless worlds, facing hardships no mind should be able to survive, all of it, she says, just so that she could do his bidding. She fulfilled her duty. She gave him everything. And she gave him something else too, in her previous round, valuable information about the catastrophe of floods, before she ended her own life, a final act of kindness toward the Junghyuk she knew. But the tragedy at the heart of her story is that none of it changed him. She poured thousands of years of love and sacrifice into a man who remained exactly the same, cold, driven, using people like tools with what she bitterly calls his petty sense of righteousness. Do you know, Captain, she asks, how excruciating it was? What hardships I faced, just so that I could do your bidding. And after all of it, after all that devotion, he's still the same man who will carry on using people, still the same man who lives only for himself. I despise you, she tells him, for living only for yourself. And then she delivers the line that cuts deepest of all. You can't save anyone, Captain. It's a devastating indictment, and it lands with terrible force because it might be true. This is the horror of Yu Junghyuk's existence laid bare, a man who has regressed so many times, sacrificed so much, watched so many people give everything for him, and yet remains locked in his solitary, self-contained war, unable to truly save the very people who love him most. The adult Yuzong is what happens to devotion when it's poured into someone who can't receive it, love twisted by millennia of suffering into hatred, a savior who became a catastrophe because the man she served could never save her back. And this is precisely why what Kim Dokja is doing with the child Yuzong matters so much. The chapter draws the parallel with quiet brilliance. Here is the adult Yuzong, the catastrophe, the proof of what this girl becomes when she's used, abandoned, and left to suffer for thousands of years in service of a man who can't love her back. And there is the child Yuzong, being raised by a man who pats her head and tells her she did good, who chose to save her instead of use her, who is deliberately building her a different story. Dokja isn't just saving a girl. He's trying to break a cycle of tragedy stretching across timelines, to ensure this Yuzong never becomes the broken, vengeful god weeping in front of the man who failed her. The whole thesis of his mercy is standing right there in the ruins of the woman Junghyuk's coldness created. Meanwhile, Kim Dokja is dying. The bounty he provoked has caught up with him, and he's been mortally wounded, missing the lower half of his intestines, coughing blood, his body failing. It's brutal, the reader who orchestrated so many clever schemes now broken and bleeding, so hurt that even a resurrection skill couldn't easily fix him. And in this state, the catastrophe awakening, the adult Yuzong's tragedy unfolding, someone comes to finish him off, to claim the bounty on his life. Dokja, dying, faces the end. But what follows is one of the most striking sequences in the series, because Kim Dokja does not die like an ordinary man. As his body gives out, his skills activate in a cascade. The fourth wall, his mysterious personal skill, partially nullifies his physical pain, letting him stay clear-headed even as his body fails. He has karma points enough to use a special ability, and the skill called the King of No Killing takes effect. And then the system delivers the words that should be the end. You have died. Ding. Ding. But it isn't the end. Because in death, something extraordinary happens. His consciousness is freed from the confines of his body. The effect of the immortal king, delayed by a conflicting skill, ripples through him. And most importantly, level 3 of Omniscient Reader's viewpoint activates automatically, the very skill that gives the series its name, the power of the reader ascending to a new level precisely in the moment of death. Dokja doesn't simply die. He transcends, his consciousness slipping free, his understanding deepening, death itself becoming just another page to turn. Fix me, he says, and the story tilts toward transformation. It's a stunning, mind-bending climax, the reader dying only to be reborn into something more, his death not a failure but a doorway. And it reframes the entire bounty gambit from earlier. Dokja may have known, on some level, that this was the path, that dying was part of the plan, that his skills would carry him through and beyond the grave. Even his own death, it seems, was something the reader could read ahead of. The chapter also names the true stakes with cold clarity. The main scenario, the catastrophe of floods, is difficulty SS, one of the hardest imaginable. The clear condition is to defeat the catastrophe of floods, Yuzong Shin. The penalty for failure is the destruction of soul. The catastrophe they must defeat is the adult Yuzong, the woman broken by Junghyuk's coldness, the tragic god who came back to end the world. And the child they're protecting is the same person, given a different path. It's an almost impossibly cruel setup, forcing the group to fight one version of Yuzong while cherishing another, the tragedy and the hope wearing the same face. What makes Chapter 99 so powerful is how it fuses spectacle and emotion into something genuinely profound. On one level it's a huge action climax, a catastrophe awakening, a hero dying and transcending, cosmic skills firing in a cascade of light. But underneath all of that is a story of the heart, a woman who loved too much and was used too cruelly, a man who couldn't save the people who saved him, and another man who is trying, desperately, to prove that it can be done differently. The adult Yuzong's despair, "You can't save anyone," is the challenge the entire series exists to answer, and Kim Dokja, dying and transcending in that very moment, is the living argument against it. Because Dokja can save people. He's proven it with the child Yuzong, with everyone he's refused to abandon. And now, even in death, he refuses to let the story end the way it's supposed to. The adult Yuzong became a catastrophe because no one chose to save her. The child Yuzong will not, because Dokja did. And as his consciousness breaks free of his dying body and omniscient reader's viewpoint ascends to its third level, you understand that his death isn't a defeat at all. It's a transformation, the reader shedding one form to become something capable of rewriting even this, the most tragic of endings. By the time chapter 99 closes, the emotional weight is almost overwhelming. A god who was once a devoted girl weeps out her thousands of years of betrayal. A cold regressor stands accused by the love he could never return. A dying reader transcends death itself, his signature skill blooming to a new level in the moment of his end. And the final catastrophe, the broken adult Yuzong, looms over a city marked for destruction, waiting to be faced. Its tragedy and triumph braided together so tightly you can't separate them, the darkest chapter and the most hopeful one at once. The adult Yuzong is what happens when no one chooses you. Kim Dokja, dying to be reborn, is the promise that someone will. And the whole shattering, magnificent point of the arc crystallizes in that contrast. The difference between a catastrophe and a savior is, once again, whether a single person decided you were worth saving. Dokja decided. And not even death is going to stop him from proving it. It's worth lingering on why the adult Yuzong story lands with such crushing force, because it's doing something more sophisticated than simply making you sad. She is a mirror held up to the entire premise of the arc, and to Yoo Jung-hyuk's whole existence. Think about what she represents. Here is a person who did everything right by the logic of devotion. She served without complaint. She sacrificed without limit. She endured centuries of hardship, wandered thousands of years through the labyrinth of worlds, gave her own life in one round and came back to give more, all in the name of loving a man and doing his bidding. By every measure of loyalty, she earned salvation. And she got nothing. She was used until there was nothing left to use, and then she became the very thing the world needed a hero to destroy. That's the horror the chapter is really about, the idea that love poured into the wrong vessel doesn't just go unrewarded, it curdles into catastrophe. The adult Yuzong isn't evil. She's grief that was never comforted, devotion that was never returned, a wound that festered across millennia until it became a god of destruction. And Jung-hyuk made her that way, not through cruelty exactly, but through his fundamental inability to give the people who love him the one thing they need, to be seen, to be valued, to be called a companion. When you understand that, her rampage stops being a monster attack and becomes the saddest thing in the story, a person screaming for recognition she will never receive from the only person whose recognition she wanted. And it makes Dokja's entire project with the child Yuzong feel almost unbearably urgent. He isn't just keeping a little girl alive. He's making sure she never has to feel what her older self felt. He's breaking the cycle before it can begin, one head pat, one you did good, one act of genuine care at a time. The adult Yuzong is the ghost of Christmas future, and Kim Dokja looked at that ghost and decided to change the ending. That's also why Dokja's death in this chapter refuses to feel like defeat. In a story this bleak, where devotion becomes catastrophe and the man everyone sacrifices for can't love them back, Dokja's stubborn refusal to stay dead is the counterargument the whole series is built on. He looked at a fixed, tragic ending, a hero destined to die, a world destined to drown, a girl destined to become a monster, and he simply declined to accept any of it. And when death came for him, even that couldn't hold him, because a reader who understands the story can always find the next page. His transcendence isn't just a cool power beat. It's a thematic promise. As long as Kim Dokja is in this story, no ending is truly final, and no one, not even a broken god weeping in the rain, is truly beyond saving. Chapter 100 is a stunning convergence of action, tragedy, and Kim Dokja's signature cleverness, a chapter where death is not an ending but a strange new vantage point, and where the deepest wounds are inflicted not with swords but with a single word. It picks up in the aftermath of Dokja's death, and it wastes no time reminding us that for this reader, dying is just another state to work from. "I've died again," Dokja observes, with the weary irritation of a man who's getting far too familiar with the experience. Level 3 of Omniscient Reader's viewpoint has activated automatically, and he finds himself in an out-of-body state, disembodied, observing the battlefield from outside his own corpse. "This feels so disgusting," he notes, "no matter how many times I experience it." It's a darkly funny, deeply Dokja way to handle death, treating the profound and the mundane with the same dry detachment, already calculating his next move before the shock of dying has even faded. And there's a great deal to calculate, because the catastrophe of floods has fully awakened, and she is terrible. The adult Yuzong, the broken god born of thousands of years of betrayal, rampages across the battlefield, a force of pure destruction. Rip, tear, destroy, the very impulses radiating off her, a roar shaking the world. She is everything the child Yuzong might have become, weaponized grief in the shape of a woman, and now she has to be stopped before she fulfills the penalty hanging over everything, the destruction of soul. Dokja, dead and disembodied, forms a plan, and it's a fascinating one. He can use his first-person main character POV, a skill that lets him possess another person and borrow their abilities, to slip into Yu Junghyuk and wield the regressor's formidable skills against the catastrophe. He'd prefer not to. There's clearly no love lost in the idea of climbing inside Junghyuk's head, but pragmatism wins. Borrowing Junghyuk's power would make fighting the catastrophe of floods far easier. It's a clever solution, the dead reader planning to fight through the body of the living swordsman. Meanwhile, the battle rages on multiple fronts, and the chapter gives us the heartbreaking spectacle of the child Yuzong fighting her own future self. The little beast lord unleashes her power, opening monster gates, summoning creatures so powerful they're considered small catastrophes in their own right, the specialty of her legendary attribute. And she turns that power against the adult catastrophe, declaring, with a child's fierce determination, that she will kill Yuzong Shin. It's a staggering image, a little girl fighting the monstrous god she's destined to become, the saved version of herself at war with the doomed one, the two ends of the disconnected film clashing on the same battlefield. But the emotional heart of the chapter belongs to Yu Junghyuk and the adult Yuzong, and it's absolutely devastating. Their swords clash, clang after clang, the regressor against the god he once sent into the labyrinth of worlds. She taunts him, noting that he can already use the sky breaker at a high level, but warning him, with the certainty of her future sight, that it won't be enough. "You will die in this round," she tells him. And there's a terrible intimacy to their combat, two people bound by thousands of years of history, one of whom gave everything for the other and got nothing back. And then comes the moment that shatters her, the single word that cuts deeper than any blade. Because the adult Yuzong learns that Kim Dokja was Junghyuk's companion. "That man," she asks, "is your companion?" And Junghyuk answers, simply, "That's right." It seems like such a small thing. But the narration delivers the context that makes it catastrophic. Junghyuk had never once referred to the Yuzong of that distant round as his companion. Not through centuries of her devotion. Not through all her sacrifice. Not even at the very end. She served him, loved him, suffered for him across an unimaginable span of time, and he never gave her that one word. And now he hands it freely to a man he barely knew, a man who's been dead for minutes. Her heartbreak curdles into fury. "How dare you," she demands, "to my face? Why are you calling him your companion?" And Junghyuk's answer is its own quiet devastation. "Because he sacrificed himself for you." It's a knife twisted in an already mortal wound. The adult Yuzong sacrificed herself for Junghyuk countless times, and it never earned her the title. Dokja did it once, and it did. She rages against the injustice of it, demanding to know what the people who fought for Junghyuk meant to him, what she and the others were to him, all those who gave everything and were treated as tools. It's the accusation at the core of Junghyuk's tragic existence, the cold regressor who consumes the devotion of others and can never seem to return it, and it's given a face here in the weeping, furious God he created through his own inability to love. What makes it even more complex is that Junghyuk, in this moment, is fighting like a man possessed, berserk with rage over Dokja's death. He was going to make the Catastrophe's death quick, he says, but he's changed his mind. He'll make it painful. He's grieving, in the only way a man like him knows how, through violence and vengeance. The stoic regressor who never seemed to care about anyone is losing himself to fury over the loss of Kim Dokja, and that rage is itself a kind of proof of how much Dokja came to mean to him, even as it deepens the tragedy of everyone he couldn't grieve this way. And that rage becomes Dokja's problem, in a delicious bit of plot mechanics. Because his plan to possess Junghyuk hits a snag. To switch to first-person main character POV and possess someone, two conditions must be met. First, Dokja needs to be dead and in an out-of-body state, which he is. But second, both he and his target need to be thinking about each other. And here's the catch. Junghyuk should be thinking about Dokja, he swore to avenge his death, after all, but his mind is so consumed by berserk rage that it's essentially blanked out. There's no coherent thought of Dokja for Dokja to latch onto. The one person Dokja most wants to possess is too lost in grief-fueled fury to be possessed. So Dokja does what Dokja always does, he adapts. If he can't possess Junghyuk, he needs someone else, anyone who's thinking about him clearly enough to serve as an anchor. Damn it, he thinks, I need to possess someone other than Junghyuk, someone who's thinking about me. Anyone will do. And he begins scanning the battlefield, searching the minds of everyone present for a thread of thought connected to him, a lifeline back into the fight. It's a wonderfully clever bit of problem solving, the dead reader shopping for a body based on who happens to be thinking about him in the middle of a catastrophe. The chapter ends on the cusp of that discovery, Dokja locking onto his host, the question hanging, this is who I can possess. It's a perfect cliffhanger, promising that the reader is about to climb back into the fight through an unexpected door, that even death and a berserk ally can't keep him out of the story he's determined to rewrite. What makes Chapter 100 so powerful is how it operates on every level at once. As spectacle, it's magnificent, a rampaging flood god, a child dueling her monstrous future, a berserk swordsman, a dead man plotting his return. As emotional drama, it's shattering, the adult Yuzong's heartbreak over a single word laying bare the entire tragedy of Junghyuk's inability to love, the devotion he consumed and never repaid. And as a character study of Kim Dokja, it's perfect, a man who treats his own death as a tactical inconvenience, who plans to fight through others' bodies, who adapts instantly when his first plan fails, always